Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Today, all eyes are on Chinese Premier Li Qiang as he delivers the government work report. The document is about the overall direction for economic, social, and foreign policy for the year 2024. As China is focusing on new productive forces, what will be some of this year's main growth drivers? How will China navigate through domestic and international challenges? To discuss all these, I'm pleased to be joined by Robert Ross, professor of political science at Boston College and an associate at the Fairbank Center for Chinese Studies at Harvard University. Professor Ross, about the same time last year at Nanjing University, you said you would take a pulse of the Chinese economy. Now that we're 1 year into your speech, where do you think the Chinese economy is? What is your diagnosis?
Well, when one looks at the Chinese economy, clearly it's having difficulties today, and part of it simply stems from a post-COVID recession that many countries experience. The Chinese people are saving after having spent a lot of money during the recession, so the domestic stimulus is missing. And of course, the globe, much of the globe is in recession, so Chinese exports are down. So I would expect in the short term that Chinese exports would grow and consumption would grow and China's economy would begin to grow again. It's just a matter of time, plus the stimulus the Chinese government is carrying out. Over the longer term, we do have to worry about the lack of productivity gains in the Chinese economy. Productivity has been stagnant for the last 10 years. So that makes it very difficult for the Chinese economy to grow. And then second, of course, there is the large debt problems in the Chinese economy. Going forward, there's going to be a question of how much confidence the private sector has in the economy, whether the state sector can reinvest as well to increase productivity.
Professor Ross, I'm so glad you talked about productivity. At the end of the day, most economists would say that it's all about productivity gains that can really boost up the economy, help the labor force. President Xi Jinping recently proposed this new concept, new productive forces, that he thought should be in full play to help the Chinese economy get to the next level, quality over quantity, the new productive forces. What's your understanding of this concept and how do you see that becoming a reality?
Well, I think President Xi would like to bolster the further technological advancement of the Chinese economy in manufacturing and production. That will more than compensate for any concerns about the demographic problems China allegedly faces. I don't believe China's problems are demographic. China has more than enough people, more than enough workers. It simply needs to find ways to increase productivity by implementing more technology into the workplace. The stagnation in productivity of the last 10 years is a problem, and there's going to have to be greater confidence for private sector to invest and greater confidence for startups to invest, and we'll see whether that can happen.
Professor Ross, there are so many analysts talking about the Chinese economy. Some say China has peaked, the Chinese economy has peaked. A voice echoed again and again and again in Davos recently. But other analysts, on a more positive note, think that China is the new China, and there is a certain level of resistance in the Chinese economy, in the Chinese manufacturing base and the Chinese labor force. Which camp do you belong to?
I think peak is the wrong word. There are a lot of opportunities for continued Chinese growth. The question is not whether China continues to grow, but how fast it grows. I don't think China will have a problem once it comes out of this recession at growing at 4 to 5% a year. And of course, on a global basis, that's a rather rapid growth of the largest market in the world. So the idea of China peaking, I think, is rather misplaced. China wants to grow at 5, 6, 7%. It's going to have that new industrialization, that new technology. But in either case, China hasn't peaked.
And then, judging from the performance of the Chinese economy in the past year, we do see a whole range of challenges, ranging from sluggish consumption to not exactly exiting of foreign companies, but really a lack of reinvestment of foreign enterprises, multinational companies based in Greater China. Why do you think that's the case, and how do you think the policies can be fine-tuned to really help boost the confidence of consumers, investors alike?
Well, the decline in foreign investment in China reflects multiple factors. One is simply the slowdown in growth in China. So the opportunities for investment are simply less. And so that's just natural. I think if China starts to grow again at 4 or 5%, the attraction of the Chinese market will return and investment will go back up again. But then second, we do have the geopolitical problems, and American companies, European countries are worried about political risks, they're worried about government opposition, and they're worried about, in both countries, I should say, there's growing concern over security. In America, we talk about TikTok, we talk about other things, Huawei, security factors. And of course, the Chinese government is concerned about security too. And this also creates concern among European American companies for investment in China. But I think once the Chinese market begins to grow again, there'll be a renewed investment in China.
Professor Ross, you talk about security. President Joe Biden recently targeted the Chinese companies, the EV companies, electric vehicle companies. By the way, as you know, China is the largest manufacturer of electric vehicles, more EVs rolling out of Chinese production lines than anywhere in the world. Can you help explain to our viewers what is the rationale behind President Biden's latest policy, and how will that policy unfold?
Well, I think President Biden is focused on the Chinese technology industries as the major force of the rise of China. And he's concerned about the rise of China and the challenge to American global leadership. And so there are various technologies, various companies, various sectors that we're trying to compete with. And one of them is electric cars, solar panels and wind turbines and climate change technologies. And so there is a incentive, or I should say an interest in the United States in simply slowing Chinese growth. Of course, this is a contradiction for American climate policy, because when so doing, we're undermining America's effort to have a cleaner environment because as you say, Chinese cars are less expensive, your e-cars, and they're very popular around the world. And so should the United States prioritize climate change, we would be letting more Chinese cars into the United States with lower tariffs.
Professor Ross, China's two sessions, known as NPC and CPPCC, are ongoing. What are the things that you're looking for this year's Chinese two sessions?
I think as always, the major agenda item is going to be the Chinese economy and what President Xi plans to do to stimulate the economy. Western observers would like to see more, but I do think China has a step-by-step approach. It doesn't want to rush into too much stimulus, too many policies at once to do what's necessary. After all, this is how the American Federal Reserve Bank approached American inflation step by step. And so I would expect there would be more stimulus from China, and I look forward to the NPC telling us the direction that Xi Jinping plans to go to revive Chinese economic growth.
And what role do you expect AI to play as a potential new force of the Chinese economy?
Well, I think both the United States, China, Europe, other countries are very interested in AI. It's the next step in technology, the next step in productivity gains. United States, Europe, Japan are all experiencing demographic challenges. And if AI can speed up growth, despite the lower populations, I think there's a lot of optimism about that. In China as well, this is a cutting edge technology. China wants to remain involved in artificial intelligence, to have cutting edge technologies for global exports and for technology development.
Finally, Professor Ross, what do you think are the bright spots, the positives of the Chinese economy, now that we've heard so much about the negatives of the Chinese economy?
The Chinese have great universities. Their innovative skills are quite strong. There's a strong work ethic in China. And so if the Chinese can put together the right policies to stimulate the economy and move China into the next technological generation for industry and factories, I think many would be quite optimistic that the Chinese people can continue to move forward at a rapid pace. But again, regardless of what happens over the next 5 to 10 years, I think China can sustain a 4 to 5% growth, and many, many countries around the world, including the United States and European countries and Japan, would be quite pleased with the 4 to 5% annual growth.
Professor Ross, it's so good to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.